Hello students, welcome back. This is Dr. Mercado. This is Accounting 2402, Principles of Managerial Accounting. And this week we are going to be covering Chapter 18, which deals with activity-based costing. Okay. Like every week, I can't emphasize it enough. Please make sure that we read the chapter before we attempt any of your assignments. In this particular chapter, we're going to be going over 3 cost allocation methods used for determining product cost. And the 3 methods are the single plant-wide factory overhead rate method, the multiple production department rate method, and the activity-based costing method. So you're going to have in your homework problems that cover all 3 allocation methods. Okay. The majority of the emphasis is going to be placed on the activity-based costing method, but it is still important to know the other 2 methods and be familiar with how to compute the different allocation methods. Basically, a single plant-wide factory overhead rate can be used to allocate all plant overhead to all products. The single plant-wide factory overhead rate is just very simple to apply, but it can lead to product cost distortions causing inaccuracies. To prevent that from happening, most of the companies use the activity-based costing method, which basically requires factory overhead to be budgeted to activities. The budgeted activity costs are allocated to products by multiplying activity rates by the activity-based quantity consumed for each product. Activity-based costing is much more accurate when products consume activities in proportions unrelated to plant-wide or departmental allocation basis. So we're going to be doing a lot of calculations. Please, as you're completing your assignment, if you come up with any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am going to skip all of the information in the chapter. I'm going to let you all read that on your own time, and I'm going to jump right into problem solving. Now, the first problem that I'm going to be covering in this chapter is BE18-2. Okay, so this is a basic exercise. So it's one of the simplest forms. And let me see, what does it deal with? It deals with multiple production department factory overhead rates. Okay, so let's get started with this specific problem that you're going to be seeing on your homework. So the problem reads, the total factory overhead for Bartlett Marine Company is budgeted for the year at $600,000 divided into 2 departments. Okay, the fabrication $420,000 and the assembly $180,000. Bartlett Marine manufactures 2 types of boats. We have the speedboats and the bass boats. The speedboats required 8 direct labor hours in fabrication and 4 direct labor hours in assembly. The bass boats require 4 direct labor hours in fabrication and 8 direct labor hours in assembly. Each product is budgeted for 250 units of production for the year. Determine, letter A, the total number of budgeted direct labor hours for the year in each department. B, the departmental factory overhead rates for both departments. And C, the factory overhead allocated per unit for each product using the department factory overhead allocation rates. Okay, so now we have all of the information. So we have $600,000 of factory overhead that needs to be split into 2 departments. We have the fabrication and the assembly. $420,000 of that factory overhead is going into fabrication. $180,000 is going to assembly. We are producing 250 units of each, whether it be the speedboat or the bass boats. And then they provide us with the different number of hours, direct labor hours, that take to produce both the bass boat and the speedboat. So let's attempt our first requirement, which is to determine the total number of budgeted direct labor hours for the year in each department. Okay, so let's get started. Remember, we're breaking this down by departments. The first department is the fabrication department. So let's look at the speedboats first. So I know I'm going to have to produce 250 speedboats. Okay, that was given in the problem. We have 250 units of each. So 250 speedboats. And for the fabrication, let's look at how many hours does it take me to fabricate a speedboat. It says the speedboat requires 8 direct labor hours in fabrication. So we have 8 direct labor hours. Okay, and then I'm going to add my 250 bass boats. Okay, and then how many hours does it take for me to manufacture or in the fabrication process for the bass boats? So it says the bass boats require 4 direct labor hours in fabrication. So we've got 4 direct labor hours in fabrication for the bass boats. Okay, and let's see what we get. Get my calculator. So I've got 250 times 8. 250 times 8. That gives me 2,000. Okay, so it'll be 2,000. And then 250 times 4. That gives me 1,000. So 2,000 plus 1,000. That gives me 3,000. Okay, 3,000 direct labor hours. Okay. That is for the fabrication. Now let's look at the assembly. Once again, we are manufacturing 250 speedboats. And how many hours did the speedboats take? I don't know. Okay, I don't know why this moved, but let's move this over here. Okay. How many hours does it take for me to have or generate a speedboat under assembly? So it says that the speedboat requires 8 direct labor hours in fabrication and 4 direct labor hours in assembly. So we have 4 direct labor hours in assembly. So we're going to multiply by 4 direct labor hours. And I'm going to add my 250 bass boats. And how many hours does it take for my bass boats? The bass boats require 4 direct labor hours in fabrication and 8 direct labor hours in assembly. So we take 8 hours in assembly for the bass boat. And let's see what we get. 250 times 4, that's 1,000. 250 times 8, that's 2,000. So that's going to give me 3,000 direct labor hours. Okay, so for both of them, we need 3,000 direct labor hours to manufacture, or for each of the processes, for the fabrication and the assembly process. Okay, so it's the same thing. It's just that for fabrication, it takes us longer for the speedboat versus the assembly department. And vice versa. Okay, we have the same number of hours, 12 hours. It's just that they're allocated differently overall. But in total, for the fabrication and the assembly department, both departments are going to be taking up 3,000 direct labor hours to manufacture 250 boats. Okay, so that is requirement A. The total number of budgeted direct labor hours is going to be 3,000. Okay, now letter B. Letter B says, what is the departmental factory overhead rates for both departments? Okay, so now they're asking us for the departmental factory overhead rates. To be able to obtain the departmental factory overhead rates, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get the amount of the factory overhead that is going to be allocated to each of the departments. For fabrication, we've got 420,000. Okay. And then I'm going to divide it by my total number of hours that I have in my fabrication department. I've got 3,000 hours. Okay. And let's see what that gives us. 420 divided by 3,000 hours. That gives me $140 per direct labor hour. We're going to do the same thing, but now for the assembly department. Now for the assembly department, my overhead is $180,000. Okay, I'm going to divide that by my assembly, the number of direct labor hours associated with my assembly department, and that is 3,000 hours. Okay, and let's see what we get. Got 180 divided by 3,000. That gives me $60 per direct labor hour. Okay, that is requirement B. So now we know the departmental factory overhead rates. So For every hour that my speedboat is in my fabrication department, I'm spending $140 in factory overhead. For every hour that my speedboat or my any type of boat is in my assembly department, I'm spending $60. Okay, so this is my fabrication rate for the fabrication department, and this is how much we're spending per hour on my assembly department. Okay, $140 versus $60 fabrication versus assembly. Okay, now requirement C. The factory overhead allocated per unit for each product using the department factory overhead allocation rates. Okay, so now let's figure out first. We're going to now figure out how much is it going to cost me to manufacture one speedboat. Okay, if I had to manufacture one speedboat, how much is it going to cost me? Well, first I know that we start fabricating the department in the fabrication department. Okay. Okay, and we know that in the fabrication department for the speedboat, we take 8 direct labor hours. Okay, so we have 8 direct labor hours in fabrication for the speedboat. Okay, and I'm going to multiply it times my rate, my fabrication department rate of $140. Okay, and let's see what that gives us. 8 times 140, that's 1,120. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing for the assembly department. Now for the assembly department for the speedboat, it takes 4 direct labor hours in assembly. So I've got 4 direct labor hours, and my assembly rate is $60. Okay. We got that from letter B. Okay. So that's going to be 60 times 4. That's $240. Okay. And now I can get my total factory overhead per speedboat. Okay. So I'm going to add my fabrication plus assembly so we can get our total. And that would give us 1,360. So my total factory overhead, and we're just talking about the overhead allocated per speedboat is 1,360. Okay. We are going to apply the same logic, but now we're going to do it for the bass boat. Okay. Okay, so for the bass boat, we have fabrication department. Now for the bass boat, it requires 4 direct labor hours in fabrication. So I've got 4 direct labor hours, and then my rate is $140. Let's see what that gives us. That gives me $560. Okay. Now I've got the assembly department. Now for the assembly department, it takes me 8 direct labor hours in assembly. Okay, so it's 8 direct labor hours, and my assembly department rate is $60. Okay, so let me put that there. Sorry about that. Let me see. Let me get my calculator. Here we go. So I've got 8 hours times 60. That's 480. Now I'm going to get the sum of my fabrication and assembly to get the total. Okay. This is my total factory overhead per bass boat. Okay. So for every bass boat produced, I'm going to be spending $1,040 of overhead in my bass boat production, and I'm going to spend $1,360 in my speedboat production. Okay. Let me see, what else are we missing in this problem? I believe that is it. Okay, so it's just a matter of reading the problem carefully. Okay, what are they asking for? Well, the first thing that they're asking is figuring out how many direct labor hours is spent manufacturing in the fabrication and the assembly process. And then once we had that, we got the information provided in the particular chapter or in the particular book, and then whatever the allocation amount for each of the departments is. For example, here fabrication got allocated 420,000. That's going to be divided by 3,000 direct labor hours. So they're going to be spending $140 per direct labor hour. The assembly department, the same thing. We've got 180,000 divided by 3,000. That's going to give me $60 per hour. Once we have this information calculated, then part C becomes a breeze, because all we're basically doing is just plugging in the information to come up with the total for both fabrication and assembly departments. Okay, so that is basically it for the first BE 18-2. This is the first exercise that we're covering in the particular lecture. Please, if as you're completing the assignment you have questions, let me know. If you have study groups, that is perfectly fine, as long as you're not cheating. You're helping each other out. Okay, so that is basically it for this lecture. Until next time, thank you.